Donald Trump's litany of court dealings continues as the Supreme Court is also hearing his immunity claim currently that is tied to Trump's attempts to delay or get out of completely the Jack Smith election interference charges, more pertaining to January 6th and the 2020 election scheme. And it's not going his way thus far, it's pretty safe to say. We have a few clips of audio of Ketanji Brown Jackson just decimating, completely destroying the perspective that the Trump lawyer was trying to build. But truthfully, the hearing ended shortly after starting, as Trump's lawyer was arguing blanket immunity for all official acts, conceding that many of the claims against Trump were private acts and that they can't get immunity for those, meaning the Jack Smith case can continue regardless of the Supreme Court ruling, so this is all for nothing. But then to put a nail in their chances completely by biting the bullet and actually arguing both, the president could appoint an ambassador in exchange for a bribe or order the military to assassinate a rival that the president deemed as corrupt, and that these could be viewed as official acts, thus leaving him immune for doing that, assassinating a political rival. He then argued this when asked about what safeguards the president would have to prevent him from going into corruption if he knew that he would have immunity from legally being prosecuted.
I don't understand how the president stands in any different position with respect to the need to follow the law as he is doing his job than anyone else.
He is required to follow the law. And what
but he's not if there's no criminal if there's no threat of criminal prosecution. What prevents the president from just doing whatever he wants?
All the structural checks that are identified in Fitzgerald and a whole series of this court's cases that go back to Martin against Mott, for example, impeachment, oversight by Congress, public oversight. There's a long series of them. Fitzgerald directly addresses this in the civil context.
Now, to be clear, what he's arguing here is the president doesn't need the fear of prosecution to rein him in because, Congress can impeach him. They'll take care of it, right? It's already incredibly hard to convict on impeachment in the partisan Senate, which is why it's never happened in 3 impeachments. But in this hypothetical, a president who has Senate or House majority could then just have free reins to do whatever because they won't convict him. If Marjorie Taylor Greene's, Lauren Boebert's, this MAGA wing of Republicans had majority of the Senate, Trump could have done January 6th, kept himself in power, and never faced any reprimand because none of them even say that what he did was illegal. The hypothetical reality actually gets scarier and scarier the more you dive into it, which is why it makes this an absolutely absurd defense.
It seems to me that you are asking now for a change in what the law is related to immunity.
I would quote from what Benjamin Franklin said at the Constitutional Convention, which I think reflects best the founders' original understanding and intent here, which is at the Constitutional Convention, Benjamin Franklin said, "History provides one example only of a chief magistrate who was subject to public justice, criminal prosecution, and everybody cried out against that."
No, I understand, but since Benjamin Franklin, everybody has thought, including the presidents who've held the office, that they were taking this office subject to potential criminal prosecution, no?
I don't. I see the opposite. I see all the evidence going the other way. Marbury against Madison, Mississippi against Johnson discussed this broad immunity principle that naturally.
So what was up with the pardon? What was up with the pardon for President Nixon?
I think
if everybody thought that presidents couldn't be prosecuted, then what was that about?
This is such a fire line of questioning. If every president was acting on the belief of having full immunity, why was Nixon pardoned directly due to the fear of facing prosecution for his use of government agencies for political purposes? It's because clearly every president has understood the threat of criminal prosecution for their corruption or actions, inaction, whatever it may be. And the precedent that they commonly want to refer to is a civil suit, in which the president was given immunity from being sued from the public, which is a far cry from being immune from your crimes.
I mean, I've heard you say it's because the president has to be able to act boldly, make kind of consequential decisions. I mean, sure, but again, there are lots of people who have to make life and death kinds of decisions, and yet they still have to follow the law. And if they don't, they could be sent to prison, et cetera, et cetera. So
I'd say two things in response to that,
Yes.
both from Fitzgerald. That's the very sort of inference or reasoning that this court rejected in Fitzgerald.
No, but let me just, Fitzgerald was a civil situation in which the president actually was in a different position than other people because of the nature of his job, the high-profile nature, and the fact that he touches so many different things. When you're talking about private civil liability, anybody on the street can sue him. We could see that the president was sort of different than the ordinary person when you say, should he be immune from civil liability from anybody who wants to sue him?
She is absolutely cooking this dude. Any white conservative who said that Ketanji Jackson wasn't qualified is just balling their fist and punching the air right now. What makes the president any different from any members of the Congress who have sole power to send us to war, those who control our national secrets, our cash reserves, etc.? In terms of the civil suit, the only argument that the Trump lawyer has that he refers back to constantly, the president in that regard is different because his relationship to citizens directly puts him in a different position in terms of civil matters because he's not necessarily seen as a civil citizen. But the president is not above the law. His relationship to Congress doesn't place him above the legal system. Nobody is. Because as Ketanji Jackson is pointing out, what should be completely obvious, what is completely obvious for anyone who's outside of the cult who is completely fine with Trump becoming a dictator, is that if these checks and balances were not in place, there would be nothing or no one to stop a president from getting a congressional majority and installing that he can serve infinite terms, unilaterally imposing the military to remove anyone who won't bow to his command, either by erasing them from America or erasing them from living. And that's all fine and dandy in that hypothetical because these are official acts in which only Congress can hold him accountable for. But oh no, Congress is on board with it. Congress was on board with January 6th. I mean, in terms of MAGA, if you look at Marjorie Taylor Greene, Nancy Mace, Lauren Boebert, Matt Gaetz, all these people who deny that there was any wrongdoing that even happened. Imagine if these people were installed to a majority in Congress and Trump got the presidency and this hypothetical was instilled. And we'll end the video on that.